Happy Super Bowl week. I'm sure everyone is just as excited as I am for this glorious matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. We get this matchup once again. And you guys are probably wondering, it's Super Bowl week. We're going to talk a ton about it. We're not. I know my audience, y'all are not interested in this game. I'm not very interested in this game. And that's a sad thing to say about a Super Bowl. But, of course, we're going to just cover it just a little bit, just get the highlights out of the way. And then we're going to move on to some much more fun topics. But welcome to the show. This is the Shadow the Script podcast. I'm your host, Jared May. We're delayed schedule Wednesday morning. Hope everyone's week is going well. But if you're a first-time listener, you can find us on all platforms searching the tag at Shatter the Script. It's TikTok, Instagram, X for social media content. And for videos and podcast episodes such as this one, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube, all using the same tag at Shadow the Script. Spotify and YouTube both support video. Obviously, YouTube does, but Spotify, a lot of people don't know that. It is great quality, great video, 4K. So if you are a Spotify listener, it's available there as well. But yeah, we got a lot of fun topics for this week. Of course, I mentioned, it's Super Bowl week. And I got a new addition to the podcast, a nice little mic. Yeah, I'm excited to be using it today. But the Super Bowl LIX, obviously, in New Orleans. But also I wanted to go into a little bit of the coaching carousel in the NFL. I understand that I went pretty damn hard on the Dallas Cowboys. But, normally what happens is with the Dallas Cowboys is they get you to where you're just absolutely gutless, just hopeless. Any word you can think of that just kind of brings stress and disbelief upon you until they get this staff together with Brian Schottenheimer, which looks pretty promising. And I just want to go into that. I'm not a believer in the franchise at all, but I just want to give these guys praise where praise is due. And just give maybe some optimism to some Cowboys fans that are still holding on to it. I have to use that side as well. I can't be that all negative side of Dallas Cowboys. I got to provide a little bit of optimism and see the light of day, the light at the end of the tunnel. So I want to go into that a little bit. I'm going to talk briefly about the New Orleans Saints. They don't have a head coach yet, which is interesting. It might be Spencer Rattler might be just that bad over there in New Orleans, or Derek Carr might be just bad, but they need a coach that can replicate weeks 1 through 2 in their past 3 seasons. They are the most unstoppable force in weeks 1 through 2, the New Orleans Saints. After that, Cooper Kupp and Myles Garrett. These are 2 NFL players that one is being told he will be traded, as in Cooper Kupp, and the other has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns, Texas's own Myles Garrett. And I want to go into maybe some possible avenues of where they could be traded to, how it could affect the draft. Guys like Cooper Kupp, what are his value? What's a guy like him? What's his value? And kind of read off his post that he put. It was a pretty heartfelt Twitter post. And then I wanted to talk a little bit of the draft. Now, this is just kind of it's way too early. The combine hasn't happened, but there's just a few names out there and how things are starting to shake up. I want to make some way too early predictions for 5 teams. And that'll be the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the New York Giants, the Las Vegas Raiders, and of course, the Dallas Cowboys. These are just the teams that I feel like I have a good sense what could happen with these teams and maybe what to expect. Now that we got some coordinators and head coaches in different roles, we got contracts expiring. We know more about young quarterbacks than we did before, that sort of thing. So all of that will be covered in this episode, and we are ready to rumble. So another thing to mention. March is coming. This Sunday is the end of the football season until we pick it back up. So this offseason, as we implement season 3, I will be hoping to get some guest interviews in play. I will have a form, invites, all that organized stuff sent out. You can join, video chat. If you're local, you can come by and we can figure out a way to get it in person. But I want to hear you guys' stories. I'm going to explore more into that. I know I've got a lot of interest from close friends and so former, current athletes, that sort of thing. Be excited if you're a friend. I want to incorporate you guys in the show and maybe bring some old friends back. But there is a priority list, so don't don't get too much ahead of yourselves. I've spoken to multiple people, so but it's in the works. I promise. I know a lot of you guys are asking. Okay, let's start with the Super Bowl headline. Super Bowl LIX in New Orleans. Now, of course, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this matchup just doesn't really excite people all too much. This is that nobody really likes the Philadelphia Eagles unless you're in Philadelphia, outside of one person that I know, but unless you're in Philadelphia, then everybody else is just like, how can you treat people like this? Like the Commanders fans walking out of the Philadelphia Eagles game, you're like, bro, like, just let them walk home in peace. They're stealing their merchandise. They're doing all this different stuff to just, cause disturbance. And you're like, yeah, that's a fan base that I want to give credit to. That's someone I want to see win, is someone who treats people like that. And I know one bag egg doesn't ruin the rest of the carton, but for crying out loud, if I see 30 people on the street, casuals, treating Commanders fans, whom I'm not a big fan of Commanders fans either, like absolute dog shit, then that might be enough momentum to make an anti-hate commercial like they're doing for anti-Semitism with Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady, which by that commercial, I'm like, are you saying that Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady are like avid haters of Jews? What are we talking about here? So that'll be interesting. And that's another avenue to talk about with the Super Bowl, is the different type of advertisements that will come out that are completely pointless and don't reveal anything. So I'm sure you're going to see some Marvel stuff. I'm sure you're going to see a lot of Stop the Hate. I'm sure you're going to see some Mexico commercials where they talk about the protests that they're doing in southern states and whatnot, saying not to deport their people and whatnot. And they fly their own flag. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of ads the mainstream media throws out there, and maybe I'll evaluate it in due time. We do also have, right after this Super Bowl headline, I have a friend that asked me to cover a specific topic, and I will be covering that for him, for his entertainment. I want the audience to interact, so this will be an interaction with the audience in just a bit. Now, look, the Chiefs 15-2 at the regular season. Patrick Mahomes had statistically a abnormal year. It just kind of was wacky. There was a lot of ups. It's weird. There's a lot of ups and downs with the Kansas City Chiefs, but they ended up on top regardless. And we all watched that Bills versus Chiefs game. I think it was the most watched game in quite some time. And we saw an NFC East showdown in the NFC Championship where the Eagles scored 55. I've covered all of that. I have talked about it. Now, with this Super Bowl, you got media days and the Pro Bowl, and they're playing flag football and whatnot. You're going to have Kendrick Lamar singing Not Like Us, which won 5 Grammys, by the way, for a diss track. I think that's the first time that's ever happened. But a diss track wins 5 Grammys. Okay. And Beyonce wins Country Album of the Year. Give me a break is all I'll say. But the angle I want to go at, I'm not really going to pick the winner because I really don't care that much. What I want to talk about is legacies. The 2 quarterbacks and a running back in this game. You're talking about a dynasty that I mentioned was a copycat of the New England Patriots, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs. It's same, but different. And they're going after a three-peat, as everyone knows. And Jalen Hurts, this is his second Super Bowl, second time against the Kansas City Chiefs, lost the first one by 3, 38-35. What's in store for him? Because we've talked about his path to being a Super Bowl appearing quarterback. What will be his legacy when he becomes a Super Bowl winning quarterback? And I think that's a challenging thing to contemplate because I've been toying with this. I mentioned, I keep talking about friends. I talk to the audience a lot off the record, is like, I feel like I struggled in that last episode to really convey a powerful message about Jalen Hurts because I just can't put a finger on it. It just seems like a very complex path to winning where you just have to look at it and say, well, the guy wins. And it almost seems like when you watched, and I know there hasn't been an example of this with Jalen Hurts, but when you watched Carson Wentz back in the day, back in when he was in his prime, which Carson Wentz is returning to play against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. But that's twice the Eagles have been in the Super Bowl, and he's been in the building and not starting, by the way. Is he got injured in that run where Nick Foles went all the way to the Super Bowl, played every playoff game, went all the way to the Super Bowl, and beat Tom Brady with the Philly special. And it almost makes me feel like that these runs that Jalen Hurts are on, if you placed a quarterback that knew the system, this is the people's argument with like a guy like Cooper Rush in Dallas. And the reason I bring up the Dallas comparison is honestly because that's like the primary one where people go, well, he's just as good, or they use that stupid narrative that Dak isn't as good as Rush or whatever. Another good one would be like Jake Browning when Joe Burrow got hurt with the Bengals. Shocker, Joe Burrow's hurt. But when you look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, you think to yourself how someone who has done as little as him, less than 20 passing touchdowns, a lot of goal line touchdowns with a tush push, only 5 interceptions, which is great. He didn't even eclipse 3,000 total passing yards. What does that say for his legacy if he wins a Super Bowl? Does it paint the same narrative of like, okay, Nick Foles is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, but like whoop-de-da? Because there's just not, like the year previous, Jalen Hurts also had, 20-something touchdowns. Like I think it was 23 passing touchdowns and like 15 interceptions, and nobody crucified him like other quarterbacks that had very similar stats in 2022. And it's like the legacy here, I think it's ineffective. I would argue, to get down to the brass and tacks, that Saquon Barkley has a bigger legacy than Jalen Hurts in this Super Bowl. This is a guy that sacrificed blood and sweat and tears on a horrible franchise like the New York Giants, who don't even have a quarterback right now, who he had to struggle with, at first Eli Manning, and then Daniel Jones, who they thought to be the prodigal son, which, sidetrack, he is a 96 overall on some ultimate team on College Football 25. I didn't think he was that good at Duke, but, moving on. And Saquon, first year out of a terrible organization, goes to the Philadelphia Eagles with a GM like Howie Roseman, with a powerful roster, which, rosters really a top 10 offensive line. A quarterback that knows how to run their offense, Nick Sirianni, who's been to 4 straight playoff appearances, in and out of different staff members, coordinators, leaving to go to different, more premier jobs, kind of elevating his proponents around him. And A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the Georgia Bulldogs NFL defense, Zach Bond, Reed Blankenship, the Ku Klux Klan. I didn't think I was going to actually whip that one out. I'm kidding. The white boys on defense over there. If you're a boy, you should laugh at that. Don't get too sensitive. But, the white boys on defense for the Philadelphia Eagles are some dogs. And so all these pieces around you argue, I would argue, like, you get to plug and play. Saquon has one of the best years that any running back has had in the history of the NFL, with scrimmage yards and whatnot. And now he's getting in his first ever Super Bowl, and his first year out of the New York Giants, basically saying, I was the difference maker for an entire franchise. And when you just put me in the right spot, really towards the end of my prime, and I gave you all the gas left in the tank, we got to where we wanted to go. So I don't think Jalen Hurts his legacy is going to be boasted about on social media everywhere if he wins a Super Bowl, which is going to be frightening, because I really don't think he's as good as people claim. I think he's a good quarterback, but this is what happens when you put pieces around him to win. But a guy like Saquon, much better story. Not story, but just the legacy in general, in my opinion, is going to be greater. Now, Mahomes, the GOAT talk. Tom Brady winning as many Super Bowls as he did, 6 or 7 Super Bowls for Tom Brady, winning one with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's when I started to be a believer that Tom Brady was the GOAT. I was kind of a hater for a long time because I just felt like the defense won championships. His playoff stats are kind of atrocious in comparison to other quarterbacks that have been in the playoffs. Your most hated quarterbacks have better stats than Tom Brady. And I understand stats don't tell the full story, but, it's hard to hate him when all he did was win. Similar to a guy like Jalen Hurts, right? There's just a lot of different pathways that contradict any type of statement. And Tom Brady didn't win, never three-peated. And Mahomes has the opportunity to do that for the first time in NFL history. And they're going to talk and talk and talk on the mainstream outlets, asking who's the GOAT of the NFL is. And it goes back to my MJ LeBron argument. I think Michael Jordan is the greatest of all time in his era. And LeBron James is the greatest player of all time in his era. And asking players to go back into a different era and using hypotheticals like, oh, LeBron would destroy the league if he went back into the 90s. I mean, look at the talent. He's 6'8", blah, 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 and all this nonsense. It's like, well, that makes sense. Now plug in Michael Jordan in today's era and give him today's training, give him today's technology, give him today's basketball talent, and you don't think he would elevate? You don't think he would still have the same drive, still have the same hunger? The hypothetical makes no sense. They only use the hypothetical in favor of LeBron. And they do the same thing with, kind of with the Mahomes thing. It's like, well, if he three-peats, well, Brady's never done that. And use all these excuses. And it's like, well, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes were in two completely different eras of football. In one era, you have basically lawlessness. You can hit, there's roughing the passer, there's hitting low, and there's far less rules and regulations. They were also operating out of a pro-style offense for the majority of the league, outside of Michael Vick, essentially. He was the birth. He presented the birth of like the read option, right? And no one knew how to stop it. And that era was focused on pocket passing quarterbacks, that 5-star, 6'5" frame, and guys that knew how to read defenses, and kind of translates to what I'm talking about with the quarterback epidemic. Well, in today's NFL, it is high tempo. It is, pre-snap motion. It is, analytics and game management. It's a completely different football game. And I think that's easy to see if your eyes are wide open. And so you talk about who's going to be the GOAT. They've both done something that no other quarterback or dynasty has ever done before. No quarterback has won 6 Super Bowls with one team and then a 7th with another team. No quarterback has ever three-peated. So the argument, who's the GOAT? Well, the GOAT is Patrick Mahomes from whenever he entered the league, 2017 on, 2018, whatever it was, and the era of Mahomes, right? And the previous era, Tom Brady, that was their GOAT. So I don't really think it's more complicated than that. I think that appreciating greatness is something that should be normalized, especially when you have a game that is changing. I think if you wanted to argue separation, the fact that Tom Brady won a Super Bowl on a different team when he was 40-something years old, when the game officially changed, like he was playing in that new era of football and still won, is kind of like, wow. It's kind of like Michael Jordan going and coming back from baseball and winning another championship. It's like, damn, how did he do that? Which I believe he might have done, actually. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a basketball expert, but we're talking about eras. I think the argument should be that they're both the GOAT and they both have done different things that nobody has done before. But that's kind of really my take on the Super Bowl this year. I think legacies are important. I think Mahomes has a lot going for him. I think Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley have a ton going for him. And I don't think Nick Sirianni should ever, I know Philadelphia is going to do it again, but should ever get hate again. I mean, you go to the playoffs 4 straight times. He's done a fabulous job with the Philadelphia Eagles, as quirky and weird as he is. So if I guess I give a quick prediction, I'm saying I can't bet against the Chiefs. But I can understand if the Eagles win. I think they have the talent to do it. It really all depends on how well Saquon Barkley runs the ball. Okay, now going into the coaching carousel in the NFL, and this would be a good time for an ad break. Going into the coaching carousel. Now, we've talked about Brian Schottenheimer, right, with the Dallas Cowboys, a new hire. If you're unfamiliar, he was the Seahawks offensive coordinator from 2018 to 2020. He was the Jaguars passing game coordinator in 2021 before he joined the Dallas Cowboys. And he was the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets in the Mark Sanchez, Rex Ryan era. And some notable stats with him. In Seattle, his offense averaged 26.5 points per game in 2020. That was top 10 in the NFL. And he's kind of known for that balanced offensive approach, kind of marinating the run with the pass. Pre-snap motions is what he mentioned, establishing the run game. He's that kind of guy. Now, the hire from the last time I did an episode was really the only thing we knew. We only knew that Brian Schottenheimer was the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. We understood that the defensive backs coach that we enjoyed so much went on to bigger and better things. Mike McCarthy left. He's skipping the coaching cycle and waiting for 2026, which is hilarious, by the way. The fat man has to wait and sit on the couch and watch every game of a fake season that never happened just to get a job, as he mentioned in a press conference when he got hired by Dallas. But if that tells you what kind of caliber of a coach hit the market, you get nothing. The Saints don't want to interview. It's just interesting. Offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer obviously promoted, and defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer retired. So you hired a defensive coordinator who coached 1 year and then retired. It just doesn't really, the dots aren't really connecting in the front office for the Dallas Cowboys. And then you say that, and you go through a rigorous podcast where you kind of are hating on the decision. And again, I'm not an optimistic Cowboys fan, but I'm providing some optimism if I could find any. Matt Eberflus is the new defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, here's some fun statistics about Eberflus. He was the head coach for the Chicago Bears, who are a riddled franchise in the NFL. They really can't get things right. They're hopeful with Ben Johnson as a new head coach. I believe Al Harris, the DB coach for the Cowboys, went over to the Bears as well. I might be wrong on that. But they're getting a pretty damn good staff together with Caleb Williams in his second year at quarterback. But Matt Eberflus used to be the head coach over there and was the head coach for 2 years, from 2022 to 2024. He was the Colts defensive coordinator from 2018 to 2021. But the notable stats I wanted to mention was that his defense ranked fourth in takeaways in 2023. And this is something that I remember highlighting when we were under the title, The Rook and the Kid, was, look, this defense can get interceptions for the Bears. Like, don't sleep on this defense. Their offense might look atrocious, and they don't really know, they don't have a quarterback. This is before they got Caleb Williams. But there's some pieces on their defense that I would bother. Like, I think if we wanted to trade for one of their cornerbacks at the time, and their safeties, I think Eddie Johnson, I think, was one of the names. I may have that wrong. I don't have that roster in front of me. But they had some dogs, and it was all behind the mind of Matt Eberflus. And so that's a positive, optimistic sign for the Dallas Cowboys. And, the fun thing about Eberflus that I read up on is that he's known for like an aggressive, blitz-heavy scheme, which kind of leads to high sack numbers, high pressure rates. And for a defense that's led by Micah Parsons at edge, who kind of played like an animal in the back half of this previous season, reaching, I think, double-digit sacks in just a few games, which was quite impressive, that's going to be really good for him. Now, you're going to have the secondary to back it up. And we talk about Trayvon Diggs in a previous podcast. The medical guy mentioned that his cartilage damage to his knee is the kiss of death. That essentially, if you want to know the truth, and this is not optimism, but if you want to know the truth about Trayvon Diggs, his career's over. His career as an elite top 10 cornerback, whatever you want to call him. I know he gets a lot of hate, but he was pretty damn good in coverage after having 11 interceptions in a year. They didn't really throw to him that much. It was just kind of evident that he was pretty damn good as a corner. And you can't cover everybody all the freaking time, which nobody seems to understand. But he's going to really struggle. And then you have a guy like Darren Bland, who really didn't play much this year. He was held back from a foot injury. You got a safety crew that is kind of, the scales aren't really balanced at safety, but you have a pretty young and effective linebacker crew. If Overshown can overcome the injury that he had, which I understand back-to-back ACL injuries, it's going to be a difficult road. And I don't really have a lot of optimism for a guy like Overshown, but he's an animal when healthy. That crew, along with some edge, you're going to get some injured guys from this previous season back in the lineup. And hopefully probably going to go after Osa Odigizua, the only defensive tackle for the Cowboys that's worth a crap. You put those pieces together, this aggressive blitz-heavy scheme is going to do wonders for guys like Parsons and for ball-hawking defensive backs like Darren Bland and hopefully Trayvon Diggs. So there's some optimism there for the defensive side of the ball. And this is not, I'm actually being serious. Like, Matt Eberflus is probably a pretty damn good hire. And the reason I mentioned the linebackers is he was a linebackers coach for the Dallas Cowboys from I believe, 2011 to 2017. So the things that he did there, he had a couple of linebackers that had multiple interceptions that year. Their grades were highly positively affected from Eberflus' coaching. So with those young guys, it can offer some veteranship, and you might see a lot of progression with those young linebackers. So those are some positive signs on the defensive side of the ball. And of course, you got the draft coming up. You got a free agency. Depending on whether that front offense wants to get aggressive or not, I doubt they will get aggressive in the way that a lot of fans hope that they will. But something to keep an eye on, because Eberflus may have some guys that he wants to target to bring over. There might be some staff members still going to be trickling in to the Cowboys staff. Something to keep an eye on. Now, here's the one that's intriguing to me. The offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys, we didn't know who it was going to be. There was really no buzz, really no nothing. We just knew that Schottenheimer had an idea of what kind of offense he wanted to call, and he has a history of being a coordinator. There was going to be some tweaks, some more pre-snap motion, marrying the run with the pass, things that I mentioned before in the previous episode. But we hadn't had an offensive coordinator yet to pair with Schottenheimer. So they go after a man named Klayton Adams. Now, Klayton Adams was the Arizona Cardinals offensive line coach from 2023 to 2024. And this is a notable statistic because if you look at the Dallas Cowboys offensive line, if you start from left to right, from left tackle all the way to right tackle, it is young, veteran, washed. And so if you don't know what I'm talking about, you got Guyton at left tackle, Tyler Smith at left guard. You got Connor Beebe at center, Zach Martin, who's 34, 35 years old, at right guard, kind of not putting up as great as performance this past year, to be honest. He did not look good. And that's something the analyst mentioned in previous episodes. And then right tackle, Terrence Steele. He's just kind of a more durable guy, but he is pretty awful in pass protection. So it's something to keep an eye on in the draft. But, however, how this applies to Klayton Adams, him being over there in Arizona, in the 2024 season, his rushing offense finished 7th in the NFL in total rushing yards with 2,451 yards and averaged 144.2 yards per game. And something like this showcases the effectiveness to run the football at a high level for an NFL franchise. And what does that revolve around? The offensive line, right? The offensive line is going to do their job in order to create gaps, to create holes, to create running lanes, and to create a comfortable pocket, especially for a veteran quarterback who's had some injury issues. All things to keep in mind when operating a really good offense. And then you move into his 2023 season, where they ranked 4th in rushing yards with just under 2,400 yards, averaging 139 yards per game, and further cementing his reputation as a offensive line specialist. Then you move into pass protection. In 2024, the Cardinals' offensive line under Adams allowed the 5th fewest sacks, 30, and the 3rd fewest pressures, 180, compared to an NFL average of 213. And that's very important. And now, something to keep in mind for those that don't pay attention to the NFL as much as others is the Arizona Cardinals have Kyler Murray. So that could be something that that shows that they had the fifth fewest sacks, because he is one of the best escaping quarterbacks in the league when he's healthy. I mean, nobody can catch him running around there. However, what poked out to me was the pressure rate. Third fewest pressures. Now, pressures is a whole lot different than sacks. Pressures is, can you get to the quarterback, put a hand in his face, get inside that pocket, and cause disturbance in really under 3 seconds? Can you do it? Or under 2.5 seconds, whatever the time is to get the ball out in the NFL before you normally get pressure on average. So that's interesting. That's something that is relevant to a quarterback like Dak Prescott, who is becoming less and less mobile, and somebody that you don't really want to get outside of the pocket as much anymore, as, you know, calf injuries, hamstring injuries, hyperextending knees, his historic ankle injury, things like that. And when you go to his yards per carry with Klayton Adams, the Cardinals were second in the league in yards per carry with 5.3 yards per carry in 2024. Another great statistic. Play calling experience, he doesn't really have. He's going to be new to being an offensive play caller. Now, I'm assuming Schottenheimer is going to call the shots, but he has experience as a co-offensive coordinator at the college level, which notably was at Colorado in 2018. So he's one of those smart, quote unquote, smartest guys in the room, which is what you want to hire for offensive coordinators, and kind of what we were asking for as a head coach, but maybe somebody that's more primitive and recognizable. But this is kind of like a hidden gem that I think Dallas found. So if you want to be optimistic, then Klayton Adams is where to look with this offense. Now, all the things I just mentioned with these coaching staff additions, you've got, like I mentioned, Klayton Adams, really good rushing offensive line coach, you know, averaging top 5 in the league in rushing past 2 seasons, top 5 in fewest pressures, top 5 in fewest sacks. And then you get Matt Eberflus, takeaways, blitzing, aggressive schemes, try and get the ball back, game management, kind of all coming together, right? Schottenheimer, marrying the run with the pass, pre-snap motion, establishing the run game. All these things, what does that point to in the draft? Your boy from Boise State, Ashton, Jeanty. That's what it points to. Now, Rico Dowdle is a good running back. I'd take him over a lot of running backs in the NFL currently. I think he did a phenomenal job with the little time he had as a starting running back, which, you know, I say little, but he should have had the role from week 1. Looking at that, you get a committee backfield with Rico Dowdle, who knows the system, and Ashton Jeanty, who is an absolute bull. And when you watch him against Penn State, really, really tough, hard-nosed runs. He had like 20-something carries for like 90 yards. Every bit of yardage that he got was carrying 2-3 dudes 4, 5, 6 yards down the field. He's going to be a monster in the NFL. If he gets those lanes from the offensive line, if he gets that pre-snap motion to deter linebackers and edge players and safeties and rovers or whoever to open up the box, you're going to get a very effective running game offense. Now, who does that help? That helps guys like Dak Prescott in the play action pass, who, if you listen to our show, we've praised Dak Prescott in the play action. That is when he is most effective. Coming out of under center, which he is pretty damn good at, reading the defense, calling the shots, making audibles, checks to the line. Dak Prescott is one of those few quarterbacks that really emphasizes that when he's on the field. So for a guy who's in the back end of his career, kind of, you know, those mobile quarterbacks don't really play to their 40. I really think Prescott's got 4 or 5 years left in him. But these next 2 are, it's like, this is it. This is all you're going to get out of Dak Prescott for his best football. And I hope I'm wrong, but you gotta contemplate for that. You gotta find ways to put the weight off of the shoulders of Dak Prescott too much. And when you do that, it allows for him, whenever necessary, to come at the defense the way that he has known how to do in the past. You know, pushing the ball downfield, up-tempo offense, you know, getting guys like CeeDee Lamb down the field, not just on slants, and he's not catching 138 balls for 1,100 yards. You know, we're talking about 120 catches for 1,700, 1,800, 1,900 yards like he had a couple years ago. or a year or two ago. That's what we're looking for. Something that the run game does is push the ball downfield when you get into play action, which Dak Prescott is one of the most highly efficient deep ball passers in the league. He's very selective with it, which is why those guys that are in the top of the line in deep ball throws, they kind of have like towards the fewer attempts in the league because they're selective. They're smart. They know when to attack the ball downfield. And the last time we saw a game management Dak Prescott where you can unleash every once in a while that, not superhero, but hey, I'm an elite quarterback, remember? Those moments you want to limit to a minimum. You don't want him to playing superhero ball. A lot of times with Dallas, we weren't effective in the run game on first and second downs to where you were putting Dak Prescott in third down situations, and that's when we pull out the numbers of Dak's third down efficiency. It was pretty damn good. Tight window passes, pretty damn good compared to the league average. I think it was well above average. So all these things that the Dallas Cowboys just did in addition to their staff members hints at drafting Ashton Jeanty, and it hints at buffing up the offensive line, specifically on the right side of the line where it's getting older, it's kind of washed. All those things are going to play a pivotal role in the Dallas Cowboys offense moving forward. So that'll be interesting to see. And that, to me, is very optimistic for someone who is not that way with the Dallas Cowboys. So if you're looking for a little bit of hope, I think that offers you some relief. And we'll see what they do in the draft. Obviously, we're going to cover it and evaluate the moves that they do in free agency. And it'll be interesting to see. So, we're on the road to, can they break the curse finally? After everyone else has done it, can you finally do it? And maybe that's the script for this upcoming season. Who knows? But some exciting things to look forward to. And I'm wearing the Dallas hat. So, okay. Now, next on the list is we're going to talk about two players who have been very, very serviceable to their franchises, loyal to their franchises, that are now going to be moved away. So Cooper Kupp. Now, this is the all-white team, greatest of all time, wide receiver. Cooper Kupp is to be traded to the Rams. No, not traded to the Rams. Cooper Kupp is going to be traded from the Rams. The Rams informed him that it would be this offseason. So I wanted to read off what he said in kind of a heartfelt post and then kind of evaluate it from there, but just kind of get things rolling. All right, Cooper Kupp, this is 22 hours ago. I was informed that the team will be seeking a trade immediately and will be working with me and my family to find the right place to continue competing for championships. I don't agree with the decision and always believed it was going to begin and end in LA. Still, if there's one thing that I have learned over the years, there are so many things that are out of your control, but it is how you respond to these things that you will look back on and remember. I have taken so much pride in playing alongside my teammates for the LA community. So thankful for embracing my family and making this such a special place for us. 2024 began with one of the best training camps in my career. Preparations start now for 2025. Highly motivated, as healthy as ever, and looking forward to playing elite football for years to come. Love you guys, but coming for it all. So this is kind of the end of that message, honestly, was kind of passive aggressive. But I kind of wanted to talk about his value. So obviously a guy like Cooper Kupp, his history in the league, I think he was a Triple Crown wide receiver, won Offensive Player of the Year in 2022. This is when he had 145 receptions for nearly 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, and played 17 football games. So that was 2 years ago, and we're entering 2025. But the value of Cooper Kupp doesn't reflect what happened years ago. It reflects what happened over the last two seasons, as well as the emergence of Puka Nacua. So you look at 2023. He played 9 games. He missed a lot of time due to injury. He had 50 receptions for about 600 yards and 3 touchdowns. Missed a lot of time in 2023, a lot of injuries. Then the following year, this past year, played 12 games, played a lot more, but was still dealing with injuries. I think he battled through some injuries towards the end of the year and kind of disappeared in the offense at the end and in the playoffs, where it's like he really wasn't incorporated in the offense at all. If at all, he was incorporated on underneath routes, slants, screens, that kind of thing. It was never pushing the ball downfield, those crossing routes. All of those have been, as of late, given to Puka Nacua, who has shown he can do magnificent things with it. And being at 32 years of age, Cooper Kupp doesn't really have as much value as people think, in my opinion. Once you get past that 30 to 31 year mark as a wide receiver and your hurt people stay hurt narrative continues to play on, it's going to be really difficult to find excellent value for somebody like Cooper Kupp. Now, I'm thinking somewhere between a third and a fourth and a fifth round pick for a guy like Cooper Kupp to a championship contender who might need a guy like Cooper Kupp. Now, when you trade for him, for a guy like Kupp at his age currently, it's more so, can we get a healthy playoff appearance from you? We don't really care about you playing all 17 games. We'll give you the incentive-based contract when we restructure your deal. Now, I'll go into his deal in just a second, but when we put you on this team that believes to be a championship contender, we want the best possible Cooper Kupp for as many games as we can get, obviously, right? But there's no promises to that. It's the NFL. Hurt people stay hurt. You're 32 years young. It is going to be difficult to find, right? And then, I want to go into his contract that he signed in 2022 in the month of June. 3 years for $80 million. Average annual value was $26.7 million per year. Signed a $20 million signing bonus. Guaranteed $35 million. It's a pretty good contract for 3 years, right? Guaranteed $75 million. Now, his 2025 details, base salary went all the way down to $12.5 million. This is probably has to do with a lot of restructuring in the deal, but his cap hit is nearly $30 million. But what's more important is his dead cap, if traded, is over $20 million. So he'll have a dead cap of $22.26 million if traded, which he will be. So the Rams will have to take on that cap space, which is kind of ironic with the Rams, is in the past, they were trade for other players and acquire the best talent and deal with the salary cap later. Well, for the first time in a long time this past season, they actually had a first-round pick, which they spent on Jared Verse, who is a phenomenal defensive line player. I think he's an edge rusher. Phenomenal player. And I think they saw that and said, I think we can do more with this. I think we can do more with drafting, because we've had some good hits. We hit on Puka Nacua late in the draft, in the 5th or 6th round. We hit on Jared Verse. Let's go get some more draft picks. And I think Cooper Kupp might not be the only one that is traded. I think a name to watch could be Matthew Stafford. Now, what they do with that this year, not much. I think that going forward, this quarterback, the quarterback group coming into this draft, I'm not a big believer in. I don't think it's a good quarterback draft. But the next year, I think there can be a lot more players. People like Arch Manning are going to be entering the draft, I'm sure of. I would predict so, that he would enter the draft. And a lot of people are speculating he would be the number 1 overall pick. Wait, early prediction. We don't even know if Arch Manning is as good as they claim, right? But just hypothetically, right? So with his contract incentives, you're going to take some dead money. He's 32 years of age, and you got to restructure his deal or give him a new deal. So he's going to get that veteran incentive-based contract to a contender. Honestly, if I had to guess, I could see him going to the AFC, a place like, I could see him going to the Bills. I can see him joining up with the Ravens, someone that's run heavy, puts a lot less stress on Cooper Kupp. Somebody that can handle the cap space, definitely. So that'll be interesting to see. But I don't think you want to pair him with other veteran receivers. I think you want a young receiver room. And honestly, I might have just answered my own question. You might see him go to the New York Jets. This is someone Aaron Glenn has watched and played and had to coach against Cooper Kupp for quite some time. He's met him in the playoffs twice now, or I think once or twice already. They've played each other, I think, 3 or 4 different times. And that's somebody that Aaron Glenn really has to study film on. And in first-time coaching, they're going to have to acquire some talent alongside Garrett Wilson, who may or may not request a trade himself. But if you're looking at somebody with a kind of a younger offense in the receiver core, you could get Garrett Wilson and Cooper Kupp and Aaron Rodgers and go just kind of push hard for one last final year. And I think that would make a lot of sense. Pair that with Breece Hall, patch up the offensive line. Aaron Glenn's obviously going to get some defensive guys in free agency, probably a lot of people from the Lions. So I think the Jets are going to be making that 1 year, let's push it with Aaron Rodgers and see if we can get anything out of him and go from there. So I think Cooper Kupp, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, all on the same team with Aaron Rodgers, that could be a real possibility. And if that happens, then you heard it here first in the Shout Out the Script podcast. So his value is, like I said, it's just not going to be as good as people think it is. It's going to be a lower draft capital. It's going to be an incentive-based contract, similar to when Odell Beckham first left the Giants. It's going to be a lot like that. And I think the Rams are very smart for making this move. Shortly put, I just think they're it's a very intelligent move by the Rams. But the other guy, Texas A&M's finest, Myles Garrett, has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. Now, his is a little bit of a different story. And he's the same as in, I want to chase championships, I want to go get a ring. The Cleveland Browns hold the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft. They had a pretty bad year. They're stuck with Deshaun Watson on an awful contract, who just ruptured his Achilles again. So not a promising future for the Browns. I think after giving them as many years as Myles Garrett has given them, he's fine. I think he's in the right to do this, to say, hey, look, I've given this franchise a lot. I don't want to be the next Joe Thomas for the Browns. I'd rather go win some Super Bowls. And if you guys could help me out after I've helped you guys out for 9-10 years, that would be great. So, his contract is for 5 years, $125 million, which he signed in 2020. So his contract is expiring this year. And his dead cap, if traded, is $36 million due to the structure of his contract with void years. So that's important to note when trading a guy like Myles Garrett. But at 29 years of age, there's some very, very important statistics that suggest that he's got plenty left in the tank. And as he should, he's only 29. That's a good age for an edge rusher. And Myles Garrett's an absolute monster. He's going to stay in shape. He's a lot like Derrick Henry in terms of offseason training. He's just going to go, buck wild. But I want to talk about his career overview. So, obviously, if you guys are aware of Myles Garrett, you know that he was the first overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft by the Browns. And he's played 116 games over 8 seasons. That's an average of almost 15 games a year. So very, very durable athlete in the NFL, which is important to when you're signing somebody who's close to 30 years old. He has 102.5 career sacks, making him one of the fastest players to reach 100 sacks in the NFL in NFL's history. That's 105 games. He has over 20 forced fumbles. His recent performances in 2024 season, he had 14 sacks, continuing his streak of at least 14 sacks for 4 consecutive seasons. So ever since they paid him his contract, he's been an absolute monster with 4 consecutive years of 14-plus sacks, which is incredible. He led the league with 22 tackles for loss in 2024, 28 quarterback hits, and 3 forced fumbles. Now, he's a 6-time Pro Bowler. He has been named a first-team All-Pro 4 times and second-team All-Pro twice, which is, that is incredible. He was awarded NFL Defensive Player of the Year in 2023 and was a finalist again in 2024. Now, his advanced stats is the fun stuff. His pass rush win rate since 2022, so 2022, 23, and this year 24, 3 seasons. Garrett has led the league with a 24.4% pass rush win rate per that's according to PFF, Pro Football Focus. And his PFF grade over the same period holds a 95.1 PFF grade, which also ranks first among edge defenders. So you're talking about a guy who has been extremely consistent for 6 or 7 seasons, someone that is extremely durable, someone that can win you awards, first team, second team All-Pro guy consistently, 29 years of age, looking to win a championship. What kind of value does a guy like Myles Garrett have? And it is absolutely a first or a second round pick. This is a guy that you absolutely want and to roll the dice on if you want to get some veteran leadership. If you don't want to take that calculated risk to get a dominant edge rusher, then this is someone that you can absolutely go get. Now, the Cleveland Browns could easily plug and replace, and I'll get to that here in a little bit because they hold the second overall pick. And if they trade a guy like Myles Garrett, they're only going to be gaining more picks. So, which also emphasizes how strategically this move was from Myles Garrett. So I've heard rumors that the Philadelphia Eagles had the cap space to hold this guy. He's from Texas A&M. Could he, visit the Houston Texans or the Dallas Cowboys? I doubt the Dallas Cowboys would ever touch a guy like Myles Garrett with his expected cap hit and with the salary cap condition the Cowboys are in with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and soon to be Micah Parsons. But there will be a contender that trades for this team, and it will be an aggressive GM, which really narrows the list down to like 6 or 7 teams. But he's absolutely going to be traded to a dominating team, one that probably already has an edge rusher, and you just throw him on the other side, and you're like, well, great. Like, I got to deal with this for, week by week basis and in the playoffs. No thanks. So that'll be interesting. But he has far greater value than other veterans his age. And I think he's going to be more hungry to play for an organization that is built to win rather than a poverty franchise like the Cleveland Browns, who Baker Mayfield revived and was soon dead after with the signing of Deshaun Watson. So, and I don't really ever get to have to hear again that Deshaun Watson is as good as other quarterbacks that they used to compare him to. Just really fell off. And, the reports are he's dealing with a lot of guilt and whatnot. Sure, I get that. But, maybe next time Justin Tucker and Deshaun Watson can stay out of the massage room. You guys fuck with Nuru? Oh, my gosh. Okay. Yeah, so those are the 2 players right now that are on the trade block market to start the NFL offseason process as we lead up to the draft. Now, leading into the draft topics here, I told everybody at the beginning of this episode that I would get into basically 5 teams where I could absolutely see these players being drafted, or these just different avenues as to why, right? And so if you look at the 2025 NFL draft order, the top 10 consist of the following, starting from number 10. The 10th overall pick is the Chicago Bears. 9 is the New Orleans Saints. Carolina Panthers at 8. The Jets at 7. Raiders at 6. So some pretty interesting moves to be made there. I'm not really going to touch most of those, but the top 5 is Tennessee Titans at the 1st overall pick. The 2nd overall pick, like I mentioned, is the Cleveland Browns. The New York Giants are the 3rd overall pick. The Patriots are the 4th overall pick. And the Jacksonville Jaguars are the 5th overall pick. Now, something to note with these teams. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the New England Patriots, both have first-year head coach entering this year. Jacksonville Jaguars, the Duval Cohen, or whatever his name is going to be the new head coach for the Jaguars. The New England Patriots hired... Did they hire Mike Vrabel? I'll look into it while I'm talking. But the New York Giants, sticking with Brian Daboll, just moved off of Daniel Jones. Cleveland Browns, like I just mentioned, and the Tennessee Titans, who with the second-year head coach, and Will Levis entering his 3rd year. Let's see who the coach of it's bothering me. Who's the head coach of the Patriots? Let's ask Grok on X. Yeah, okay, it's Mike Vrabel. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Yeah, Mike Vrabel with, I think Josh McDaniels is the OC over there. So Okay, the 5 teams I want to get into. And I guess we're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys because I already mentioned it earlier, so we're going to knock that one out quick. I think the Dallas Cowboys, who hold the 12th overall pick, are going to go with Ashton, Jeanty, whether they trade up, trade back, whatever the path of the draft tends to be. With all of their coaching staff additions that I mentioned, it all kind of points to Ashton Jeanty. It honestly definitively points to Ashton Jeanty. And if it's not going to be someone like him, I think they'll wait and draft. This is the best running back draft class I've seen in a long time. There's going to be so much talent in there. You can go get a guy like Travion Henderson. You can get a guy like Ollie Gordon. I mean, just the list goes on. The running back from Iowa is rock solid. Any of these cats, but Ashton Jeanty makes the most sense because I think his family lives in Frisco. He's got a lot of Texas ties, and he's claimed that he wants to be a Dallas Cowboy. Well, Jerry Jones is the type to just chew that up, right? Like the only guy that has said, I want to be a Dallas Cowboy and had the potential to be, and we passed on him, was Johnny Manziel, which was very smart from the Dallas Cowboys organization because they decided to draft Zach Martin in his place. But I think clear cut right now, the best of my knowledge, I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to pick Ashton Jeanty at the 12th overall pick, or just in general in the first round. Whether they trade up, trade back, I think they're gonna get Jeanty. Moving on to the number 6 overall pick, I mentioned it was the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I believe they just hired Pete Carroll, and they got Chip Kelly as the offensive coordinator over there. So kind of the stones are being set in place for the Raiders to go after the quarterback of the future, right? And I think with the quarterbacks mentioned in this draft class, you got guys like Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart is moving some heads over at the Senior Bowl. Quinn Ewers entered the draft. I think you have Kyle McCord, Riley Leonard. All those guys are not first-round guys, but the first couple I mentioned are. Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward are your top 2 candidates according to scouts heading into this draft. So I think they're the most likely to be drafted in the first round. Now, there have been hints that the New York Giants really like Shadur Sanders, and they want to go with him as their quarterback of the future. But I think that's a smokescreen. I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to get Shadur Sanders out of Colorado and pursue with him moving forward. And the thing about Pete Carroll is he's not a guy that's going to be coaching for, years and years and years. This could be a 2, 3, 4 year rental until you put a guy like Deion Sanders, who gets more head coaching experience at a top level at Colorado, to plug and play with his son in Las Vegas in about 3 or 4 years. I think that's a very possible outcome, because I think what Deion is soon going to figure out is that he can't get the NIL money that he's asking for at the University of Colorado, and he can't put up the resume to get a bigger coaching job in the college football atmosphere. We'll see. I'm not trying to doubt, but I'm saying their family has stuck together from Jacksonville State, I think in high school too, but Jacksonville State, I might be getting that wrong. Is it Jacksonville State or Jackson State? Whatever it is. Their first college, Colorado, and now enter the NFL. There was a lot of buzz that they both wanted to stay together and whatnot. Then you get, his son Shiloh. So it would be interesting to see, but I think the Raiders go with Shadur Sanders, long story short. Then I wanted to cover the New York Giants pick, and this kind of goes hand in hand with Shadur Sanders going to the Raiders. Is I think Cam Ward, the smokescreen is we want Shadur Sanders in New York, and I think it'll actually turn out to be Cam Ward out of Miami. I think Cam Ward has shown a lot more maturity. He's got a more resilient path. He's got much more calmer feet in the pocket. As a former guest of our college football episodes, Turner was talking about, okay, he looks like the wacky inflatable tube man in the pocket, just kind of sitting out there, kind of going wherever the wind takes him and firing missiles. But one of the things that Todd McShay mentioned about Cam Ward was he is very efficient in pushing the ball downfield. Shadur is in those guys. He takes more calculated risk in the pocket Now, this has to do with a subpar offensive line and whatnot. There's factors that come into play with pushing the ball downfield and throwing the deep ball. But Cam Ward is a much more aggressive quarterback, which I think New York would want to pair something like that with a guy like Malik Neighbors. So that'll be interesting to see. And you get young talent over there. Well, there's really like two. But you get young talent like Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy and Cam Ward, and then you patch it up with some pieces around the offense, and you can start building a future. But the poise that Cam Ward has is probably the most appealing to NFL scouts, I would imagine. But yeah, I think the Giants pull off a smokescreen, and they've done it before with Daniel Jones, and they do it again here with Cam Ward. Now, the Cleveland Browns, I think this is the most interesting one. I think they're the most likely to either trade out of their pick or stay where they're at and draft a specific player that I'm about to get into. But as we mentioned, Myles Garrett requested a trade from the team, and I think they will trade him before the draft or on draft night. And I think that would reward them at least a first or a second round pick. So if they get rid of their top tier edge rusher, they obviously wouldn't be moving out of that second spot. They'd be gaining additional picks, which gives them the freedom to take a risk for a generational talent like Abdul Carter out of Penn State, a top tier edge rusher. Probably the best. I mean, he's literally Micah Parsons reincarnated as a draft prospect. So I think the Cleveland Browns trade Myles Garrett, get additional picks, and go with Abdul Carter from Penn State with the second overall. And I think there will be no issues with that. I think they're going to be very happy with the decision they made. I think it's a win-win for both Myles Garrett and the Browns organization. So a little loophole there. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, this is way too early. And I think the first overall pick, I think the Titans revealed exactly what they're trying to do. I don't really think they're trying to hide anything, but they want to go with the best generational talent entering this year's draft. And you look at that and you see, okay, who won the Heisman Trophy? It was Travis Hunter. Why did he win the Heisman Trophy? Well, because he could play defense and he could play offense, both at a highly efficient level. He can get over 1,000 yards receiving, and however many receptions he had as a receiver. He can get multiple interceptions on defense. He is a generational talent. He is a Shohei Ohtani of the NFL. So, of the future NFL, I should say. So, the Titans, I think, clear cut, they're going to go after Travis Hunter with the first overall pick of the draft. And I think they're going to be happy with that. I mean, the Titans, hilariously, are like that team where 40-year-old, 35 to 40-year-old veteran wide receivers go to die. So a lot of times they say, like, Cooper Kupp is going to go to the Titans because, players like Calvin Ridley, Randy Moss, like all these random, Julio Jones, all these random receivers that used to be, like, incredible go play for the Titans on the back end of their career. But I think they go with a guy like Travis Hunter. But I could see them moving off of Will Levis as well in this draft. And I don't think they can get high-level picks for him. But I don't really think this coach is a fan of him. And why should he be? But I think Will Levis's time in Tennessee is pretty much wrapped up. But to get a pivotal piece like Travis Hunter, where they can explore which side of the ball to play him on, is going to be elite for the Tennessee Titans. So, yeah, my 5 predictions there. The Tennessee Titans go with Travis Hunter with the first overall pick. The second overall pick will be Abdul Carter going to the Cleveland Browns. The third overall pick from the New York Giants is going to be Cam Ward out of Miami, a smokescreen where they thought they were going to go with Shedeur, but they go with Cam Ward instead. At the 6th overall pick, I've got Shedeur Sanders going to the Las Vegas Raiders. And with the 12th overall pick, I think the Dallas Cowboys go with Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. With all the coaching staff additions, I think it all points to Ashton Jeanty. And with that, those are my 5 team predictions, way too early predictions for the NFL draft coming up this spring. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much the entire episode for you guys. I hope I covered it in a way you can understand. But I've enjoyed this new microphone. I think it's going to sound great for you guys. If you can, if you guys are listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and share with your friends. As the off-season approaches, well, like I mentioned, we're going to get into more interactive content. So, guest interviews, current and former athletes. I'm really going to try and make a push for that in the off season, from March all the way to, early September and maybe further on after that. That wraps up our show. So like, follow, subscribe, download this episode, share it with your friends. You can find us at Shout of the Script on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, at Shout of the Script, or social media, Instagram, TikTok, and X with the same tags at Shout of the Script. We will see y'all next week. Enjoy the Super Bowl. I would play Not Like Us on the way out of here, but I'd get copyright restrictions, and it's just a gay-ass song. So enjoy the Super Bowl. Enjoy the ads. Don't hate Jews, and enjoy the rest of your evening. All right.